Yeah. All right, I would like to now introduce our Board of Directors. I am Mike Rowley. I'm joined by Cindy Coe, Tasha Woods, Madeline DeMatenon. Kathy Day is unable to join us tonight. We also have our Superintendent, Troy Turno, Executive Director of Teaching and Learning, Jennifer Kuntz, and Executive Director of Finance and Operations, Kim Snyder. And we also are joined by one of our representatives, student representatives right now, Amari Thorne. So thank you. Board first action item is the consent agenda. We had the opportunity to review these items individually and seek clarification from district admin prior to our meeting. I would entertain a motion.
I move that we accept the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Tasha has moved that we accept the consent agenda and Cindy has seconded. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, consent agenda. I'd also like to take a moment, part of our consent agenda packet today. We do have a couple of retiring teachers that I'd like to mention. First off, our district choir teacher, Gay Ott, is retiring at the end of this school year. Miss Ott has been a teacher for 25 years, with 22 of those years in Ellensburg. Thank you, Miss Ott, for bringing the joy of music to our students, school, and community for the past 2 decades. Also, retiring at the end of this year is Kathy Savage. Miss Savage is truly a lifelong educator. With a total of more than 46 years of teaching, we have been fortunate to have Miss Savage with us as a teacher at Lincoln Elementary for the past 40 years. So thank you and congratulations to these 2 outstanding educators, and they will be missed. So. All right, board, that now takes us on to administration, and first up is student spotlight, Ida 5th grade archery demonstration.
All right, so we are very happy to have Mr. Scott Robertson has organized for us a demonstration from some Ida students of archery in their club. And so we are going to we've got a great audience tonight, so that's awesome. We're going to set it up for safety reasons. We're going to ask everybody in our audience to stand up and sort of move over here with us. And we'll turn the camera so people on Zoom can see the demonstration, and we'll make sure that Mr. Robertson has a microphone, and they'll have a demonstration, and they'll also explain a little bit about what they've learned and the process. So we'll get that going as he gets them set up. We'll get started as soon as they are ready.
If you could get you guys to just kind of, like Mr. Torno said, just kind of come back behind these tables. Thank you for inviting us out here to do this demonstration. We've been really excited. When I told these guys that we were going to go in front of the board, they were like, what's the board of directors? And so now they get to experience this firsthand. So this is, as many of you know, this is our first year. We got this, my dreams kind of came to reality when last spring I went to Mrs. Duncan and I said, hey, I'd like to get involved in this NASP. And she says, what's that? And I explained what it was and how it's like, there's millions of students worldwide that participate in archery through this NASP program. And it's super duper safe and just a wonderful program. The kids have flourished. So the 5 archers that I've invited here tonight are going to demonstrate how to shoot. Before they do, though, we thought we'd get you guys involved. And so we're going to do a couple activities that they did at the beginning of the year, because there's a lot of things that you can do with archery that you don't need a bow to practice with. So we're going to do a string bow with you guys. So if I could get you to stand up, first thing that we do with our students, you guys can come over here and you can help me, is the first thing that we do is that we establish eye dominance, because when you're pulling a bow back, you need to pull it to the side of your face that has the dominant eye. So we need to figure that out right now. So you can all of our guests can do this too. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your hands just like that, just like Mr. Dwight's doing, and you're going to form like a little triangle. Okay. And now find my nose in that triangle. And whatever eye, I can see your right eye over there with the green jacket. I can see your right eye, and I can see that with you are left eye dominant because you're looking at me with your left eye. So you're not even thinking about it. Now, some of you made too big of a hole, so you just have to make it smaller. And you're clearly right eye. Yeah, and your right eye, and your right eye. What are you, Mr. Torno? You're left eye dominant. So these guys, so Riker, one of our, these are all really great shooters, by the way. They're all very responsible and very committed. But Riker is right-handed. But what handed bow do you shoot?
Left.
Left, because we can build muscle memory. We can build the muscle, but we can't change our eye dominance, can we? That's just what we're stuck with. So they have like willingly shot left-handed bows. I have a lot of left-handed shooters. It was surprising how many left eye dominant kids we had. But they willingly shoot it, and they shoot it well. So it's really exciting. And in fact, some of them have come to me and said, hey, can I try right-handed today? Like my bow at home? And then they get it, and then they're like, okay, I'm gonna go back to left. Yeah, this is hard. Okay, so we do everything on how to whistle commands. And so the whistle commands tell us what to do, when to get the bow, when we can shoot, when we can get arrows, and there's protocols to go in place with that. Okay. So before we do that, can you guys grab those string bows for me? And we'll have you guys they're going to show you how to do the string bows. So like I said, without a bow in hand, you can practice a lot of archery skills just with a string bow. Yeah. Can I give you guys just a little opportunity? Actually, I'm kind of mixing up my order here, but can I give you an opportunity to just introduce yourself, what grade you're in, what's your teacher, and what you enjoy about archery maybe? We start with you.
I'm in fourth grade Mrs. Durham's class, and I enjoy that we do different activities every single, we don't do a different activity every single day. We get a chance to practice it, and then once we've gotten good at it, we try something new.
And that's Paisley, by the way.
Hi, my name is Riker, and I enjoy archery because we get to shoot and practice, and I'm hoping I can go into the league. And my teacher is Mrs. Holdeman, and I'm in fifth grade.
My name is Connor. I'm in fourth grade in Mrs. Dyke's class. And what I enjoy about archery is that I've never done it. And it's just really nice to do archery because at my old school, we would never do something like this.
My name is Serenity. I'm in fifth grade. My class is Miss Holdeman. The thing I like about archery is that you can follow through and reflect yourself, which is one of the last steps. And it's just really nice because then you could get better at it as you go. My name is Lana Campbell, and I'm in fifth grade at Mrs. Corbett's class. And what I enjoy about archery is that it's pretty competitive, and also on holidays, and sometimes not on holidays. On Valentine's Day, we got to shoot hearts, and then there was like near Christmas, we got to shoot at stockings and got a prize if we hit one. And then there was just this one time where we were trying to hit balloons, and boy, they popped.
Yeah. And they even got to face off against Mrs. Duncan, our custodian Jason, who's filling in right now. So that was pretty special, getting to shoot with some of their favorite adults in the building. So I'm going to pass you a string bow, and we'll demonstrate this. So when we shoot a bow, we'll always put our opposite side to the target. So if I'm right eye dominant, then my left side would be closest to the target. Okay. So if you can imagine there's a target on that wall, I'll hand you a string bow and just give you an opportunity to practice drawing. And so if you look up here, we've got a poster that shows our 11 steps to archery success. So these guys are getting those down, and I'm actually learning these too because I've been an archer for like more than half of my life, but there's still things to learn and grow. And one of the cool things is it just really enhances our focus and our concentration. So hopefully it transfers to the classroom. I would love to see a study on it because it would be really cool to see how much it changes with focus. I'm going to hand you a string bow, and then we will go through those 11 steps together. Sound good? Awesome. So one whistle is shoot. It's by synonyms. So one whistle is shoot, two whistles is get bow, and three whistles is, what is it? Get arrow, get arrow. I almost forgot myself. Can I have you folks? I know that my archers are not going to shoot that way at all, but I would like it if you guys could just get behind this white line right here. It would make me feel a whole lot better. He's got antlers on his head. Okay, so I've blown my whistle twice to get bow. At this point, we usually have our bows kind of sitting about in between what we call the weight line and the target line, and then or in the shoot line, and then we have a target line up here. So they're going to explain a little bit on the safety of where and how to get the arrows. Okay. All right. Yeah, you want to wait on this one? So yeah, perfect. Okay. So you guys go ahead and approach the line. So you'll notice Riker is faced the opposite way. Him and Connor are facing each other because one is right, one is left eye dominant. And these girls are getting their quivers oriented so that they can both shoot because they're both right eye. So while they're shooting, I won't distract them at all by me talking because they are used to that. But yeah, isn't that a loud, like satisfying sound? Like the first time they hit it, they're like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. But look at how safe they are. Their arrows are always pointed towards the target the entire time. You won't see any archers like walking around with an arrow knocked or anything. They're very, very safe. So we shoot what we call an end, and an end is 5 arrows. Today for demonstration, they're going to shoot less because we don't have time, but they shoot 5 arrows, and Connor will explain. Can I give you the microphone so you can explain scoring? Okay, you guys want to rehang your bows. And so they're going to explain that and safety of it on everything from here on is obviously can be dangerous as well. Like when they're pulling arrows out, you can imagine if there's multiple people, but they have totally, like I said, embraced the safety of it, and they understand just how important it is to approach the target. There's no monkeying around, and they know that. Okay, Connor, why don't you explain the scoring to us?
So how the scoring works is pretty much starting from white is 1 point, and you just go in until you get to 10, and then the middle circle right there is a X, which when you hit that, it doesn't really count as points, but it's really hard to hit right there because it's like the center of the target.
Awesome. Okay, who's going to tell us how to approach the target? Was that you?
Yeah.
Perfect, Serenity.
So when you approach the target, you're going to want to make sure that you're behind the waiting line, which is the line right above where the target sits. And so normally there's always going to be 2 people at a target. So you only want to have one person go up there at a time and the other person wait behind that line.
Hey, well said. Okay, I'm gonna do whistle command, and then you guys can show us, Paisley, you can show us how to take those arrows back. Okay. Yeah. Go. Okay, so that is get arrow, 3 whistle blasts. And you'll see, like, look at them already approaching the line. So one person goes up and one person stays back so they don't get impaled by a knock or something. Oh, let me give you the microphone here.
Oh. And one of the mistakes made that can really hurt is if you pull it out and someone's standing right behind you and they get an arrow to the gut.
Have we had it?
No.
No.
And also always make sure your hand is here, or else the arrows can slide out and slide somewhere else that you don't want them to be.
Let's give Paisley a turn. So, okay, go ahead and pull those out. I want to talk about how to carry the arrows back.
When you are carrying the arrows back, you will want to just like you'll want to do what she's doing there and cover the tips so then you don't stab anyone or yourself.
Awesome. Hey, I'm sure there's a lot of things that I missed, but do you have any questions for us? Again, thank you for inviting us tonight. We feel very blessed and privileged that you wanted us to come. So, we've sure enjoyed ourselves, and, fourth and fifth graders doing this is kind of pretty cool, isn't it? So my dream would be that they would go on and they would continue it for life. The statistic that I saw when I was starting this program was that 70% of all archers quit because they're either frustrated or for other reasons. But if you can get those 11 steps right there, I've told the kids, like, if you can really get that and get dialed in, then you will enjoy this for a lifetime to come. So, again, do you have any questions for me, or? Yeah.
Yeah, I just, do you have any ties to the 4-H community with the archery club? Because I know, they have quite a big group that gets together on a regular basis.
Yeah, I haven't reached out yet. I think I have the contact information. I need to do that because they start kids, I think at like age 6, they can pick up a bow. So yeah, it's pretty exciting. This particular program is only for 4th through 12th grade. The bows that they were shooting are called the Genesis, and what's really cool about them is an adult can pick up that bow or a little kid can pick up that bow, and they're not like a normal compound bow where they have let off. So when you pull back, it gets easier. It's actually, you're holding the same amount of weight the entire time in the draw cycle. And they are, so you can pull it back to 30 inches or you can pull it to 19 inches. And so that's really nice. And then they're adjustable from 10 to 20 pounds. So one of the other cool things is if we do go to competition, which is also kind of in the dreams, the playing field is level. Everybody shoots the same bow, the same arrow. There's not like, oh man, these kids from the rich school have the really nice bows with the stabilizers and the sights and all. No, it's just everybody shoots the same bow. So what it boils down to is the archer, not what they have, not their equipment. So yeah.
You mentioned, and you're clearly, all of you are very passionate. Are you planning on doing this program next year too?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
All for 4th and 5th graders?
It's for 4th and 5th graders. Yeah, it's for 4th and 5th graders. And these guys, they come twice a week in the mornings before school starts. And so I've taught it to all of our 4th and 5th graders in the entire school. And all of them did really well. And then these guys, they're so passionate. They're like, can we do it before school? So now they're here. Yeah.
I guess, one other question. So you, was this part of the curriculum or something that was like started out that way and then it's kind of moved into a club type feel where you guys are getting together for the rest of the year kind of a thing?
Yeah, that's correct. So it was a curriculum. They learned history. They had archery journals actually where they were journaling, keeping track of their score and how they progressed. They had different prompts in their journal about like cooperation and teamwork and problem solving, those types of things. So yeah, it was great. It was, I think we did it for a month. We spent the whole month of November just about on it. And now we've transitioned to the club. So yeah. And the club's open to all 4th and 5th grade. So it's not like a selective club, but yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for inviting us out here. We really enjoyed ourselves. Thank you, guys. Did you guys get the target?
Thank you so much to Mr. Robertson and to the team and to all the parents that brought them. We really appreciate it. It was an outstanding and informative presentation, and we'll kind of put the room back together and resume our meeting.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Robertson, and students. That was wonderful. So thank you. That takes us now into our student reports, and we have Mac and Amari here with us. So take it away.
Okay, so I'm kind of reporting more on the club side of things, clubs and activities, and then Amari is going to take sports. So FBLA had their winter conference, their winter leadership conference on February 2nd. So that's like their regional conference to get to state. There were 10 first place awards, 5 second place awards, 4 third place awards, 4 fourth place awards, 4 fifth place awards, and 2 sixth place awards in our Ellensburg chapter. So all of those students will be attending the state conference come April. And then this last week, or not last week, it was like the February 17th through the 24th was FFA week. And Emily Ryder placed first in the District 4 Employment Skills Leadership Development event and qualified for FFA state. TSA had 17 members qualify for their state conference. That is March 13th through the 16th. And they are headed over to SeaTac. And then this last weekend, Marine Biology Club went to the Orca Bowl, which is a trivia for ocean life, geography, biology, physics, and chemistry. And both the Ellensburg High School teams won 4 out of the 6 rounds before they were eliminated.
So I have a little bit of winter sports update and then spring sports. So for basketball, our boys basketball team had a great season and had 3 of their members for varsity selected for all conference. Honorable mentions are senior Darius Ndaya and junior Gunnar Fens, with junior Garrett Mars being selected as first team all conference. Our girls varsity basketball team is extending their state record winning streak. So they have won the most amount of games in, I think, Washington state history, which is pretty cool. And they're pursuing their 3rd straight state championship. Their next state game is Friday or Thursday.
They have a game.
Yeah, they have a game Thursday and Friday. And for them, they have first team players, juniors Jamison Phillip, Lane Rogel, and Alana Mars. And Jamison Phillip also won CWAC Conference Player of the Year, which is super exciting. And then honorable mention is senior Brooke Rivet. Our boys wrestling sent freshman Cash Eiler and Wyatt Green, juniors Leif Holmgren, and seniors Connor Carlson, Skylar Summers, Luke Bain, and Case Montgomery to state. Cash Eiler was the only one to place, and he got 5th. And all conference nominations for them: first team freshman Cash Eiler, senior Case Montgomery; second team freshman Wyatt Green and senior Connor Carlson; honorable mentions junior Leif Holmgren, junior Declan Graham, and senior Skylar Summers. And then our cheer team has done a great job of cheering for all of our PEP events and for all of our games and for their constant support. And our EHS PEP band has also been there for all of the basketball games and is doing well there as well. Spring sports started Monday, which is track and field, which I think had 180 kids sign up, and then 150 kids started practice on Monday. So that's super exciting. Baseball and softball and tennis all started their practices and tryouts, and I heard that they had record numbers of kids show up as well. And then golf started Monday, and we had a record of 15 girls sign up and show up for golf, which is awesome considering last year we only had 2. So, yeah, spring sports have started and winter sports are wrapping up and have had great seasons. And that's the sports update.
All right. Thank you, Mac. Thank you, Mari. That takes us to teaching and learning. Jen.
Okay. There it is. Just a couple of quick updates, and then we'll look at some data from our mid-year data benchmark period. And so first is update on text. I know there's been some questions, or I've been asking questions about policy around curriculum adoptions. So we don't have to talk about it tonight, but I put some information there on some of the types of wonderings or conversations that we might want to have. So the policy 2020 and procedure 2020, there's some gray area around some things, like when we go to purchase a new edition. So same publisher, same book, but a new edition. Like, is there a threshold of, if the information changes X amount, we should run it through a formal board adoption again, or can we just purchase it, having it vetted it prior? Or another example would be adoption process for materials that fall somewhere in the middle of current definitions of instructional materials based off of our policy. So things like tech platforms, for example, Lexia, they are technically sort of fall under the supplemental, but they're used with all students. They can be considered supplemental, but they could also be considered sort of part of core instruction. So some gray areas that just looking for some clarification around at some point in the future. It's not pressing at this point. Go ahead.
How do you want that clarification? Like, do you want that added to a study session agenda? Like, how do you want us to have that conversation?
However you feel you want to provide it. I'm happy to have a conversation in a study session. If you guys already know what the response is, it can just email, but however.
Okay.
I think a study session makes sense to me because it seems like they're kind of different kinds of gray areas.
Yeah.
So,
Some nuances.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. The next one is dual language task force update. So as you guys are aware, we've been sort of meeting monthly since November. So we just had our 4th meeting with the dual language task force. Those first 3, the first 4 were really about just building that shared knowledge around what is dual language, what are different program models, and do we all use the same language to understand what these things are, looking at research that supports dual language programming, and creating sort of a shared vision and mission for what that would look like in Ellensburg School District if we were to implement a dual language program. We've got 3 currently scheduled left in the year, and those future meetings are going to focus on district data and examining feasibility and sustainability. So really digging into what are our numbers, what is the community saying, what structures would we have to have in place, what resources would we have to have in place, what might be some potential barriers, and kind of getting into the weeds with what would implementation actually require, and is it both feasible and sustainable? Because one of the most important things about a dual language program and starting one is that you can feel confident that it's sustainable for a certain extended period of time. And as part of that, we had a World Cafe a few weeks ago, I think at this point, where we invited Spanish-speaking families and students to come provide feedback on we asked them 3 broad questions. What's your experience in schools? What's your child's experience in schools? What would you like to see more of? And is there anything that you want us to know? So we initially had, I think, 14 family groups that had said they were going to come. We only ended up with, I think it was 10 to 12 adults and about 10 to 12 students, secondary students. But it was a great conversation. I don't know if you're familiar with the World Cafe model, but at table groups, there's a facilitator. The whole thing was conducted in Spanish. And we got some really great feedback as a first step. It wasn't specific about dual language because at this point, we're not ready to get feedback on really the minutia of what it looks like or programmatic elements of it. And so it was more about what are you seeing with your student and what would you like to see more of support-wise for your student? So we have sort of an initial next steps for responding to that, one of which was because it was in the evening at Morgan Middle School, we fed them pizza and we had pizza, but we kind of identified that it might be better to go into spaces and places that these groups are already gathering to gather feedback. And that might be a better way to get a larger representation of voice there. So that was a good experience. And then just a quick note about the ML program improvement outside of the dual language exploration, because there's the whole other side of it too. And that was one of the clear feedback is that they want to see better supports in classrooms for their students and in schools. And so we are continuing that work and building that capacity with all teachers to understand that they are language teachers. And so we've done things like we've started including gen ed teachers in our training days with our ML expert and things like that. Another update, AI and Ellensburg School District. So OSPI came out with guidance around the use of AI in Washington schools. And one of the most important things about their guidance is that they emphasize a human-centered approach to the use of AI. So their whole model is you have to start with human inquiry and human questions and input, and then use AI, and then it has to end with human analysis and reflection on what AI has generated. So just as a reminder, we did hold a short training for all staff before school started, very broad look at AI and where it might be going. But we are currently assembling it's actually going to be in April now, won't be meeting in March. But we're getting PD and guidance on 3 layers: teacher use, student use, and district guidance and communication policy. So we're really going to be looking at how do we talk about, communicate, and use AI in our schools. And it's pretty crazy, some of the tools that are already out there. I was just watching some stuff, and I'm about to go into some data. There's tools out there now that will just create data visualizations in seconds for you. And it even shows you like all the code they're using behind the scenes. And it's pretty wild. So I think it is on so many levels, it's going to sort of change the way we do business. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for leading that. Washington State OSPI was like 4th in the nation for getting that guidance out. They were pretty quick on that, if we can be quick on AI anymore. Is there a way somehow to include student voice in this, at least high school, secondary student voice on AI, because they're getting it from all sides too. And so they're seeing that application very differently.
Yep, that's a great idea. And we'll figure out how we can weave them in to that conversation. And the training. I mean, we're starting with training because it's very much like
and it might not be training, but right, somehow to open up, just to kind of see what they think or what they think about the training too.
Yep. And as part of the training, figuring out what is that student experience with it currently. Yep. Anything else on the AI piece? All right, so you guys have had these slides and hopefully have had some time to look over them because I included quite a bit of slides. So I don't want to go through every single one in depth, but certainly if you guys have, I want you to be aware of some of this stuff. And then certainly if you guys have questions, please let me know and we can address those. But I did want to make you aware that in mid-March, OSPI is going to be releasing the new WSIF data. So this is what I've presented to you guys before. This is how Washington State sort of scores schools on their performance. And I included this slide because I think it's important to note that part of the reason they're evaluating every year is because the COVID years disrupted the type of data they were able to gather. And so they had to sort of limp their way through until they have 3 years of the stuff that they told the federal government they would gather. So we're almost there. As you can see, we're starting to get those 3 check marks in a row of the different measures that they use. But down the left-hand side is the indicators and the measures that they're looking at, and then what particular years they're grabbing that information from. So you will see that in this year's scoring, 2018-19 data is still part of that overall score, just because we were unable to get proficiency scores for the COVID year, and then they changed the blueprint, so they couldn't use that. So these are the indicators that are used in the next one. What they haven't publicly released yet, or they haven't released, is the threshold line. So we don't know if any new schools will be identified in our district, but what we do know is that the schools that have already been identified will remain identified for the next 2 years. So 3 years of identification.
Sorry, Jen, could you remind us what schools are identified?
Yes, and part of this, looking at this data, this was before we moved to 4 schools. So part of the picture is that IDA students are represented in our data across various schools. But right now, the schools that have been identified are Lincoln, Valley View, Morgan, and the choice schools.
And Jen, sorry, can you also tell us, because they're identified, what happens?
They have different tiers of identification, but so actually Mount Stewart has been identified as well, but at a lower tier. So there's just not as much emphasis or support in responding to that. But for the ones that I listed prior, they're at a higher tier of identification, which means it comes with a higher level of support. So that OSPI comes alongside and identifies which specific areas you fell below that threshold in, and provides coaches and some grant funding to help improve in those areas.
So we get outside funding and staffing.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. We have an OSSI coach, and all of the buildings that have been identified get grant funding. So what you'll see on here, and when it is released, and you can access it on OSPI's report card in mid-March, what you'll see if you were to pull up this particular report is the trend. So the 2019 run, the 2022, and the most recent one, the 2023 run, so that you can see some trends across groups. Another way that you'll be able to look at the data is this screen, which the left-hand side are those indicators that are being scored. And then across the top are the different subgroups that they they disaggregate the data for. And so what you'll see in those boxes is how that particular subgroup did in that particular indicator. And again, that bar of color down at the bottom are deciles for how we did as compared to other schools across the state. So the bright orange represents about the bottom 10%, and the dark blue represents about the top 10% of schools. And then this is another interesting way to look at it. So you can also pull up the data this way, but this shows the change in decile from the previous identification, which is last year. Normally they're only going to do every 3 years, but in this case it was last year. And so each of those boxes represent a 0 means we're in the same decile that we were last year compared to other schools. A 1 means we improved a full decile in that area. A -1 would mean that we dropped a full decile in that area. And so this also has that range that you can see on the bottom from the lowest performing to the highest performing districts. So that's what you'll see on these slides included for each of the schools. So Ellensburg Learning Center has relatively little data, and partially because if there's not enough students in a certain category, they won't populate that portion of the data. Morgan Middle School. And let me know if you have questions. Again, I can go more slowly, but I know you've had time to review it. So I'd like to just make you aware that this is going to be released publicly along with the threshold line for who's identified. And then what I have here, I mean, we've talked about this before, and obviously we have schools in improvement. You see a lot of orange across here, which means we have room for growth in those areas. But some celebrations that I noticed from this data, ML is trending up in every building except the high school, ML achievement and growth and overall. And so that's been an area of focus for us is ML improvement. So that's encouraging to see. High schools made up some improvements to the grad rate for MLs. So Morgan Middle School's math student growth percentile trended up for almost all student groups and continues to trend up in all students overall. They also trended up in almost all student categories for regular attendance and had some significant trending upwards for attendance for students with disabilities. So while we look at some of the comparison to other schools and we know we have room for growth, just like with student data, there's a difference between achievement and growth. And it's really important to look at growth to determine, are we headed in the right direction for improvements? And then Lincoln had some significant, looks like maybe the top 10% for the ML progress rates, and has a lot of blue on the trend details and has significant growth on the ELA student growth percentile for MLs. So room to grow and places to celebrate.
Could I ask a question now, or do you want to keep going?
No, I'm going to switch to map. So
Okay.
this is perfect.
Just in terms of like closing the assessment loop, what happens with this data now? Besides releasing?
What do you mean, like closing the assessment loop?
Well, how is it going to be used to inform what happens going forward?
What happens with our schools, or what happens with the state deciding something for our schools?
I guess what happens that we can control locally?
Okay, yeah. So this is benchmark data, and I'm going to talk a tiny bit about the difference between like benchmark data and formative data. But benchmark data is helpful for sort of a look at what is the overall health of our systems, what gaps or trends can we see when we disaggregate data across different student groups. And then where do we need to turn our attention because we can see some disproportionality or we can see some lagging in growth. So it helps us give a big picture of the health of our system, and particularly in comparison to other schools. So it helps us see not just based off of our own internal measures or assessments that we've created, but compared to an assessment that's been given across the state.
So I think building on that question, because you called out the celebrations, ML learners. Our schools have been identified for this for a while. Is there something that our system did purposefully to support ML learners or to focus on ML learners?
Yes, we've been doing a lot, I would say. So the ML population was one that we were consistently below that threshold line and consistently in the bottom 10% of schools. That and students with IEPs was the other category that was consistent across most of our schools. And so we put very specific plans in place. We gathered a group of stakeholders. We've had an ML improvement committee that's met multiple times over the course of the last couple of years. It's in part what has launched this investigation into whether or not it's feasible for us to do a dual language program. We have PD that's focused on that. Our OSSI coach is helping us examine our practices. We're using ESD 105 to help both our ML teachers and gen ed teachers. We've included all staff training during some of our lid days. So I would say we've done a lot.
Right. So it's fair to say the system got the data, you saw it, and you came up with a plan and some supports. And that didn't just happen this year. That happened in previous years. This has been a multi-year approach to it. Is there anything that you see in this WSIF data now that, or maybe you don't want to, maybe now is not the right time to have that conversation of, okay, we've got the supports in place for ML learners. Is there a spot that you would recommend or are thinking now the data is showing us we should go to this next step of additional planning?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think the students with disabilities is still one of the subcategories that falls below that threshold line, and the disproportionality is something that we shouldn't ignore. So I think across the board with all of our student groups, we have room to grow and improve. But certainly when that disproportionality jumps out at you, like our ML students, which it's still there. So we're closing that gap, but it's still there. And our students with disabilities, then we have to, that's our obligation to ensure that we're actually doing something in response to that.
So when you say that, what I hear is that students that are in identified groups, there is resources put for staff support, for curriculum support, additional PD, and then continue tracking of those students going through the system.
Yes. And this is just benchmark data. So this helps us see, like, at the end of the day, our efforts changing that, the benchmark data we looked at to begin with. But there's a lot more data that's collected at a classroom level and a building level that helps us track progress. So it's not just when WSIF comes out that we know where we're at. Anything else with WSIF before I talk MAP? Okay, so MAP growth data, we, in January, we had the winter MAP window, and so that's closed up. So we have growth from fall to winter that we can provide. I have reading and math here. The dots represent the median growth and achievement score for that particular grade level, meaning half of the students fell above that and half of them fell below that dot. And I chose to do growth data. There's all sorts of different ways to present the data, but I chose growth because, again, I think that there's a difference. They're both very valid and valuable information, achievement versus growth. But growth really is, to me, a clear indicator of how well we are providing the right supports to our students. So it's broken out by school and by grade level. So again, that dot represents that grade level's median performance. Half of the third grade students grew above that and half below. And this quadrant is anything above this blue horizontal line is going to be above the 50th percentile of growth. The vertical line is achievement. So if they are in this quadrant, the upper right-hand corner quadrant, they are both high achieving, above the 50th percentile of achievement and above the 50th percentile of growth. And if they're in the lower left, they are below the 50th percentile of achievement and below the 50th percentile of growth. And so you can start to see some trends. Again, this is benchmark data that helps us have a good picture of the overall health of our systems. This is Lincoln's. And one of the things that I noted at this particular growth period was that our growth in math, which has actually now been a trend for the last couple of years, has continued to outpace our growth in reading overall. This is Mount Stewart's. This is Valley View's. And I'm going to point this out. I'm sure this team would actually not like to be in the spotlight at all, but I'm going to point it out because I'm going to use it as an example of one of the things that we can do as a system when looking at this type of data. So this third grade team, half of their students fell above the 90th percentile for growth. That is fantastic. I mean, if we're average, we're expecting to fall on that 50th percentile. That would be average. They're also a team whose students on the SBA have been outliers in math. So they've had more students score a 4 over the last couple of years than we've seen a 3 and a 4 across. So when you see something like that, those outliers, you can ask yourself, what is that team doing differently? They're doing something. They might not even be totally aware of the decisions they're making around math instruction, but they have done something as a team that's really supportive of student learning in math. So exploring that, asking them, doing observations, getting them to share their practice, even though, like I said, I'm sure they would not like to be in the spotlight of praise, but I think they should be. So, and then, did you?
I just have a quick question on the data. So third grade Valley View doing a great job. Are they sharing with the other schools, other third grade math classes, how they're going about getting
so
those results?
We're working right now on kind of surfacing what some of those things are. We kind of had identified it this summer, looking at some of their the last couple of years of SBA scores. And initially, they had been totally open to come talking to our admin team at our admin retreat about sort of just doing a root cause analysis. But then it was summertime and their teams they were not all present. So we weren't able to do it. But they are open to it, the conversation. They just they're like, I don't know. They're not wanting to overly shine, but yes, we are working on finding ways to figure out what is that and how do we spread that knowledge and how do we get other teachers in observing if it's something that is observable in their instruction. So this is sixth grade math and reading, and sorry that there's so many more dots on this one. There's just no way for me to pull it without all of that. The way we roster NAWIA, we'll pull every single teacher. So that represents all of the classes there, even ones that aren't math or reading content area teachers, but that's their group of their students. So anyways, what I circled for you is there, and you might need your readers for this one, but there is an S and a G. The S represents the school, where the school fell median growth percentile, and the G represents where that grade level fell. So in comparison to the rest of the school, if that makes sense. And if you can see those tiny little S and G. And this would be seventh grade. Again, that S didn't move because that school score stays the same, but you can see the grade level in comparison to the school. And this is eighth grade. And this is high school reading, both 9th grade and 10th grade. And this is 9th grade algebra. And this is geometry. At the high school, they take the course-specific assessment. All the rest of our district takes a more generalized math assessment. In algebra and geometry, it's a algebra assessment they take at the beginning of the semester and end of semester, and a geometry assessment they take at the beginning and the end. So this is the 9th grade and 10th grade geometry classes.
Why do you think the 10th grade geometry classes is so much significantly worse than the 9th grade?
So, I mean, again, I don't think data ever gives us all the answers. What it does give us is the opportunity to ask ourselves questions and then to dig into that. The 9th grade geometry class are the students who took algebra in 8th grade. So they tend to be our higher achieving students. I mean, you can see that represented in the graph. Almost all of them fall above the 50th percentile of achievement. And so that might play a factor in how they see themselves as math students. I think math perception of yourself as a math student plays a big role in math achievement.
Well, I do have questions.
Yeah.
And I did email. And it's coming, there's a couple of them, and board reps, I have a question for you too. So you can also say, nope, Tasha, I don't want to answer that. I'm wondering, when we're looking at MAPS data, MAPS is a benchmark assessment that we give system-wide. So that means 3 times a year. And so it's difficult with the way the data was presented for me to understand. Like, I appreciate the discussion about growth, but I also think that the board has to have a discussion about achievement. And so it's hard from here to see a trend because I'm not seeing fall to winter and I'm not seeing the previous years on this. So it's hard to go, yes, our 3rd graders are getting closer to our now outdated strategic plan, which is going to be updated, but that is probably in every school district strategic plan, 3rd grade reading scores. What percentage of our 3rd graders read at grade level? I don't know from this. So that is confusing to me.
Yes. So we would be very happy to provide that data if that's the data that you're looking for. And one of the things that's challenging, I think, in education is we are very data rich. We've got all sorts of data that we could present. We've got different ways to slice it. And actually, I did include, this wasn't initially when it got initially uploaded, but I did include some quick snapshots of some other types of reports so that you guys can start thinking about what is it that you'd like to see? These are just examples of NAWIA reports. We can also provide other different reports outside of NAWIA or different visualizations of the data, but really trying to determine what type of visualizations are going to be helpful to help us understand where are we at and what are the things that we care most about to be reporting on. So there are other types of reports. There's proficiency levels at buildings, and that's where you can see those color bands of where the percentage of kids. So this is an example of a second, third, fourth, and fifth grade class in a building and the percentage of kids in each of those bands. Now, it goes a lot deeper than just at benchmark when talking about a MAP assessment, because MAP is not aligned to grade level benchmarks. It's not that kind of benchmark assessment. It is normed and we're given percentiles based off of a normed group. So when they are in the 50th percentile, that just means that in that group of 750 kids that they're compared to a few years ago, they fell in the 50th percentile. Does that mean that it was benchmark for that grade level? Maybe, maybe not. So they actually have a range of what potentially is quote unquote on grade level benchmark when looking at a MAP assessment. So, and that's what I mean by lots of data, lots of different ways to slice it, lots of different ways to look at it. SBA is obviously grade benchmark aligned, standards aligned. This has standards aligned to the RIT scores. So you can see, and that's what I'll show you briefly, but it's not this percentage of students is reading at third grade expectation in January.
So I think you bring up two questions that the board has to discuss. And so I really think the board should have that discussion hopefully now or in the study session of the first one, I guess. Our system, our school district buys maps every single year. We purchase it. It is a nationally normed test that is a benchmark test that most systems give. It's a commonly used form benchmark assessment. So when we say, yes, they're compared to a group of students, it's a nationally normed group of students going through this company, NAWIA. And I think it's reasonable to assume that it's a worthwhile assessment.
Yes.
We take time to do it. We purchase it. It's a worthwhile assessment. So while we might want to argue, is it at grade level or is it standards, or have that discussion about that? Or do we believe that the MAP test is something that we could say with something like this, a visualization like this, of saying, well, this is where students are showing at grade level or in the blue or in the green, however you want to say that, but to have that discussion 3 times a year after these benchmark tests, is it something the board should discuss or know about?
Yeah, I think getting the information after each assessment would be good.
And then I think it's what Jen had said. There's so many data visualizations. You have so much data. There's so much data out there. The presentation tonight was difficult for me to see because what I'm looking at from the seat is like, where are we trending with ELA? Where are we trending with MAP? Where were our third graders? Because we do system inputs. Like we do control or have a say or a vote on the budget. So if we're seeing ELA not growing, then that's a discussion of, well, is there a new curriculum adoption? Do we have PD? Do we have to do supplemental curriculum? But it's really difficult for me to sit here and to make that decision or those choices or know what to wrestle with without knowing more of some sort of idea, which we can talk in circles in education all the time, of what is grade level, what is a standard, where are our third graders, right? And so if we've agreed that MAPS is the proficiency scale we're going to use, and we're going to administer this 3 times a year and take time from classroom opportunity to do this, then I think we need a little bit more clarity on that data. But I'm going to throw it to the rest of the board to say how they want to see the data. Because I would like to see the data with the percentages. In the fall, I had this many students coming here, right? And then by winter, we had this many students. This is where we've moved. I do think the board would be well served with a study session on RIT scores, on what that is, but I don't think that should be now.
I'll just weigh in to say, yeah, I would like to see achievement and also year-to-year comparisons of, so does MAPS give you, sorry if this is a repetition of a question Tasha already asked, does MAPS give you how many students are at grade level, or is that kind of an interpretation that you pull out?
It's a bit of an interpretation, but for example, what you're seeing up on the screen now, that gives you the percentage of students that fall into each of those bands. And they would say that anything between that grade level is pretty much between the 40th and 60th percentile.
But I mean, but they do say, like, whether we want to agree with MAP's definition of it or we want to wrestle with achievement versus growth versus proficiency, let's throw that in there. I mean, they will say on there, and then if we're pulling that same thing from fall and winter, and we have a shared vocabulary and a shared way of approaching it, I think it would give us a little bit more clarity of, I mean, third graders are complex 9-year-olds that, right? Yeah, we don't want to put them into a box, but we can at least have a spectrum, right? That we can say, okay, yes, we're moving the dot. Yes, we've put enough in here. And so to meet that, I think that a visualization like that, or the district level report from NUIA, or some of those other visualizations.
Yeah, and I think my brain is kind of going to, in the past, and I didn't love the visualization that I created, but and you probably don't remember it because I show you lots of stuff, but there was a chart that actually had color bands going across because we were following the cohort. So this cohort of student, but that was what that was, is this was the percentage of students both on SBA and MAP that passed last year. This is the percentage that passed this year. And at different times of the year, sometimes it feels like we want to think and look at it a little bit differently. So for me, mid-year, I want to look at growth to see, are we growing mid-year? And I think that report came at the end with the spring benchmarks, end of year. So you could see full year growth alongside the, where are we ending the year proficiency wise with students this year versus last year? But yes, we can do that.
I think if it's helpful if we're correlating how we are having that discussion with our expectations about how teachers are having that discussion with parents, just so it's in the same line. So we know what we're expecting to glean from this data, and we have that same expectation for parents who are going to conferences, what they should know and how is it useful, or what are they expected to get out of that. So if it's something in that kind of vein, then I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the family report, and of course, we can improve with how we communicate our talking points around how parents can use the information or what they can glean from the information. But I have a slide show there, or a slide on that too. And again, so this is just another, so I'm going to get there quick so you can see what a family report might look like and how to kind of glean some of that information. But you can also disaggregate so that the image above would be all students. And then the bottom two are disaggregated for race and ethnicity across 2 different categories to see how, so you can disaggregate to see how are different student groups doing. There's also class overview. So for an individual teacher, they can at a glance see, out of my 25 students, this many are in that blue zone, this many are in the green, yellow, orange, and red. And then you can get the actual list of those students, which I've cut out in the example, but you can get those students. And what you'll see across is more additional information, deeper information, because it has this is a math example, but it has the different categories or subsections of math and what that particular student scored in that particular subsection. And then it'll give you a glance at what your class overall is compared to the national average. This is the student profile. So you can dig deeper into an individual student, and this is similar to what those family reports look like. But on those, it'll have these little images up at the top, talk about, does this student have a relative weakness or an area for growth compared to the other subsections of that assessment? Do they have a relative strength in an area compared to other subsections? And then it tells you their growth percentile and their achievement percentile. Now, I would look at this particular example and say 96 percentile of achievement and 3rd percentile of growth. Are we concerned about what's going on and how engaged that student is? potentially. But it also gives you growth over time. So it is normal to dip up and down. I mean, there is a standard error of deviation on the assessment where if they took it again the next day, they're going to be within a certain band of RIT score. So you get to see how they're achieving over time. But then you can dig deeper and in, for example, one of the subsections in math is numbers and operations. And then you can see what particular standards or topics is that student ready to learn, which ones need reinforcing. And so this is only showing a couple of them, but there's a list of them across all of those 4 domains. And it's the same with reading across the domains for reading. So there's a lot of information to be gleaned from this in terms of what are students' strengths? Are they growing over time as we would expect them to? What areas could we support a little bit better? Because compared to relative to the rest of the assessment, they struggle in that particular domain. There's a number of things at an individual level that can be gleaned from MAP, as well as MAP being a benchmark assessment that we get to look at summary data for how our system's doing.
Are there other things that you want to talk about
I have a
related to
lot,
that?
but go ahead.
Okay, so you just told us about a very fine-grained kind of analysis. So this is really abstract level of generality. But I'm noticing with the slides on math and reading for the elementary schools, not in all cases, but in many cases, math growth seems more dramatic than reading growth, not necessarily achievement, but growth. And then you get to Morgan, and it seems like suddenly reading kind of starts to outpace math. So I don't know if that's a real pattern or I just noticed it sort of casually, but I'm wondering, are there mechanisms in the district as a whole that look at not only, oh, this group of 3rd grade teachers at Valley View is doing really well in math, but like what happens when it seems like suddenly math scores start to diminish? I'm just wondering if there are ways that the whole district can respond to patterns across grade levels and start to think about, is it curriculum or professional development or other things?
That's exactly it. And Tasha kind of alluded to it earlier. And I would say any place that we want to see improvements, and I've said this before, those are where we haven't adequately supported at a systems level. It's not that particular individual teachers or classrooms or grade level teams are not working extremely hard for students and doing their best. There's something systemically that we haven't done properly to support it. So then you do start to look at those things. Is it something in the master schedule? Is it that we haven't provided the right kind of PD? Is it that we haven't provided the right resources or materials or support? I mean, that's the questions you start to ask, which is why I say data doesn't actually give us answers. It allows us to ask questions.
So it was great that you walked us through and you saw how MAPS also gives you a full suite of information all the way through. So I'm wondering in the fall, because it does give you that suite of information, what is an example of how our teachers now use this to inform instruction for like their 9th graders sitting in front of them this year? After they take their MAPS test, I see this group of 9th graders doing this, therefore.
So in the algebra assessment, because it's so course specific, that allows those teachers in math, for example, at high school to say at the start of that semester, what skills in algebra do my students already have? And which one? So we don't necessarily expect them at the beginning of the year to perform well in that. They haven't taken algebra yet. Their percentile might be fine because they're compared against other students who took it in the fall before they took algebra too. But yes, they can determine which standards or skills do my students already have and which ones are lacking, or which groups, how can we group students who have similar like need.
Does our district have an ability or a protocol or a system to do that so that take any grade level, 3rd grade, 9th grade, teachers can then see that, have the space to interpret that data, and then instead of just doing scope and sequence of core curriculum Eureka, core curriculum this, we are now differentiating to these students. Do they have the resources to do that?
Yes, capacity we might need to improve on. So I'll use elementary as an example. We've done a lot of work over the last couple of years around win time. And for the last 2 years, they have been released multiple times every year as a grade level team to look at data like this alongside other data sets. But it certainly includes map data at the beginning of the year before WIN groups start. They look at the data, they group students by need for WIN time, looking at things like, well, these students all need this particular standard. And there's a process for that, and it's been scaffolded and facilitated by our MTSS specialist. So that one is pretty structured. But it was also new to our teachers. So we're sort of going through a release process now with that, where grade level teams know what that data analysis process looks and feels like, and are able to do it sort of on their own. We haven't done that same intentional work with secondary yet. We do have data protocols. We've had that as part of our PLC process. We've got some data analysis tools, some looking at student work tools. And so it's there. We just have further capacity building to do so that it becomes second nature for them to know how to do it. Yeah.
And board, I would like to put out there a request that we consider that, because another way of saying like capacity for that is, how do we get personalized learning paths for all students? Right. So that was a difficult question, I think, to answer pre-COVID. And then COVID kind of threw in some curveballs left and right on that one. And now we're coming out and we're staring down AI. Right, when we talk about personalized learning plans and identifying data. So I think that the board needs to have a study session surrounding all of those words and definitions. And then I've got 2 other questions, or like just lenses, maybe like from the student and the family lens on maps. So that was what I was going to throw to the student reps. What is the student experience with maps? What do you know or do with maps?
So this isn't just from me, but this is from other students that I've talked to. Some friends of mine, is they don't get why we're doing maps. Like for them, maps is viewed as a pointless assessment that's just nothing tied to their class. So they're like, what is this? Like, this is just thrown to me a couple of times a year. And so I'm just going to click through the questions, not really do it because it's not tied to my grade. What's the importance to it? So I think that's not how I view it necessarily, but how some other students have viewed it. So I think more of a clarification to the students of, this is why we're having you do this assessment. Because from a lot of kids, they're like, maps testing, great. This is 2 or 3 days out of my week that I have to do this or something, and I have zero idea why I'm doing it or what the benefit of it even is.
And then how do we communicate to home adults on this? Like, not even just how, like you already mentioned, we need to work on that, but how are we communicating to home adults? How are we empowering them with this knowledge, right? And then how are we engaging with them? So if I stick with that 3rd grade, how many 3rd grade parents would know if their child is at 3rd grade reading level or not? If we did a survey, would they have been told at a parent-teacher conference with a map thing that, hey, your child is actually not showing at 3rd grade reading material. Here's how we assess this. Here's how we look at this. And then here's what you can do at home. What do we give parents or home adults to do for math or reading at any system, at any grade level of our system? What are parents, I like to use home adults. What do home adults do at home to support their child in math or reading?
Yeah, and I would say that our elementary teachers are pretty much across the board pretty good at providing that information. We do give the map assessment, both the family report now. That's more recent. I think last year was the first year that we did that across the board, but that is provided at both the fall conference and the spring conference. And yeah, I think many grade levels have little printout sheets of, here's what you could do at home to support reading. And a lot of it is reading with your child at home at elementary in those early grades. But we also, with the dyslexia law, so not only do we have map growth, but we have map fluency. Map fluency it was one of OSPI's approved assessments for the dyslexia screener that we by law have to give. And part of that law is that we communicate those results to parents. So that's also, that's a tricky conversation because it is not one that we previously, with the word dyslexia, had in with as many students as would be flagged in a dyslexia screener. And so we've been working on talking points with that too for our K2 teachers who now have to have that conversation with parents at conferences.
I will just follow up on Tasha's question that as a parent of kids who have gone through Morgan or like the elementary Morgan and then high school, that the experience of the parent-teacher conference changes dramatically at secondary level. And I think I've gotten the results of standardized tests, MAPS tests mailed to me, you know, and like the standard, like just explanation of what the numbers mean. But at no point have I ever had a conversation with a teacher about what those scores mean or how that might change my child's learning from that point. So I'm wondering if we can make secondary parent-teacher conferences more robust and enriched the way that elementary school conferences are on this point, but maybe others as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think parent-teacher conferences at secondary are just tricky because of the numbers of students that teachers have, but certainly we can look at our format and the communication and what happens there. And I appreciate the feedback about the feels meaningless. It's not a surprise to me. One of the areas that we're trying to move some practice is with student goal setting. So I wouldn't say it's happening across the board, but we do have teachers who are using MAP assessment scores and RIT scores, and students are creating their own student goals where they talk about, what does this mean that this was your score? What's your next? And then they get excited when they reach that RIT score. And so it's obviously an area that we need to continue to address.
I appreciate the way you framed this whole conversation from the beginning, that data is never the answer. It just brings up more questions. And I think our discussion definitely proved that to be true. But I think that the board needs to have a better way of communicating with district staff. I don't know who we communicate to of how we can look at this data, because I struggle with it of meeting the expectation of, yes, we are seeing where our students are achieving. We are also seeing where they are growing, and we can see trend lines. And so I would like a pivot or change in that, and then additional conversation in written communication and data in general.
Yes, and I think because there's so much, it's so important to know exactly what we want to see. And part of that is then consistency with how we're looking at it and talking about it. And that would help as well. So I mean, Troy's talked about that, the importance of a strategic plan where we can embed some of these goals into, and then we can decide what specifically are we tracking? What do we want to get the updates on? And then we can start to grow those trend lines.
I see Troy coming up with more WIG ideas for teachers and things like that in this data, so. Thank you, Jen.
Yep.
All right, Troy, next up, superintendent update.
All right. So mine's mostly just informational items and a few things at the end to think about that we'll be discussing later. So just an update on the WASA PLC project. So the admin team on March 4th next week, we'll be getting together and we'll be going through a workshop with Anthony Muhammad on inclusive and healthy culture in schools. This was one that was done earlier in February, but it was one of the weeks where we had, I don't remember whether it was the interview week or DOJ week, but we couldn't get everybody together. So we have the recordings. We're going to go through it as a team. Our coach will be in district next week as well, Mike Hagedon. The primary focus with him is going to be on secondary intervention systems. And working on those. It's intervention systems are always difficult at every level because it requires a lot of moving parts and things like that. And they're particularly difficult at secondary just by the nature of scheduling and the students take multiple classes and things. So we'll be working on that. If any of you are interested, Solution Tree will be hosting that evening from 5 to 6:15 p.m. the second school board session for cohort 1, of which we belong. We're in the 3rd year of that, being in cohort 1. So I'll send that information out again, but just to put that on your radar, if you're interested, let me know. There's always lots of questions about the DOJ visit follow-up, and the reality is there's absolutely nothing new to report other than that they asked us after they left, send us an email asking for some information specifically about Superintendent Haber's, former Superintendent Haber's calendar, and a couple of meetings on that and some emails around that. So we gathered up whatever we could find and sent that off to them this week. Other than that, we have had no communication, and we're just basically on their timeline waiting. So as soon as we get any updates with that, we'll certainly pass that along. But at this point in time, they have not had any other communication with us other than asking for that data, which we've provided. The legislative session's wrapping up. Everybody knows that there's some increase in funding. There's not going to be much going on, waiting on all sorts of final decisions. We know that there's probably going to be a tiny bump in MSOC funding, materials, supplies, operating costs. Some senators are reaching out. I gave some information to Senator Warnick this week about some increased costs for our utilities. So they are listening there. The problem is every one of the proposals, the amount shrinks a little bit. We also are anticipating they may give as being discussed, a very slight raise in the SPED, special education lid. They did a bigger raise, last year, and they're talking about a tiny bit of an adjustment. So there will be a little bit of new money coming into the system, but not a ton. As soon as we know that, we'll plug that into the budget. We know, and it's been well documented in the district, that this is the final year of ESSER funding, and so there's $1.4 million going away. So that's those cuts, and will likely, with not $1.4 million coming back in replacement from the legislature, that will lead us to go through a process where we have to make some cuts in staffing in other areas. And since there were no cuts in staffing last year, and that choice was put off until this year. So that will be a little more complicated for us. But we've already been talking with building leaders to start thinking about priorities. And the fiscal team is developing our planning spreadsheets, just waiting to put in those final numbers. Yesterday, I met with the EEA presidents and talk with them through what we're thinking, where we're at, where we're going to be at with our timeline for when we think we'll have once the legislature closes on the 7th, we should be able to figure it out, put it in the spreadsheets. And so by the time I meet with them next time, I should be able to have that and show them where we're at and what we're talking about. So we had a great conversation with Michelle and Jamie yesterday about this stuff. Then we will obviously, once we plug it in, we'll obviously get the board involved. We'll then create and talk with you about a plan to figure out. Right now we're kind of planning for worst case scenarios, just so we all have our head wrapped around it, not planning with numbers or making decisions, but just wrapping our notion around what it could look like. We're definitely in better shape than many districts since it's board meeting week. Washougal came out earlier. Washougal is a similar sized district as us. They're having to cut $3 million, and they're actually that's their sort of determination for things. Lots of southwestern Washington districts are in trouble. Evergreen came out in the news today. They're having $20 million discussion at their board meeting today or tomorrow. So we're in better shape than a lot of those, but it's gonna make a little bit of difference this year. So we're putting together all of our data. We'll work on a plan with the board about how we get some community input on it. We get your input. We figure out before we get too far down the road, sort of what we're looking at. We'll basically be looking at developing multiple different options. We'll look at efficiencies in each department. We'll go through the whole gamut of things. But until we have the numbers to plug in, we're just really talking more theory right now. And so by the end of next week, the week after that, it'll go more into the actual practice and into looking at that stuff in a more very specific sort of case. But we have been having discussions with all of our department heads and our building principals, and just sort of getting everybody's thought process and where we might have some efficiencies, where we might have some opportunities. to make some cuts that don't impact people, but we're also have to prepare for the worst case scenario. So that's kind of where we're at with that. More information to come. Certainly as we get the numbers, we'll plug them in and be ready to go. And then the last thing in my report is, we've talked about planning and now that we sort of have a longer term thing, with me, no, you wouldn't want to start when you didn't know who was going to be here. So we've talked about strategic planning and portrait of a graduate. And so I will send this stuff to you, but I just really want you to think because we do have some decisions to make coming up. So one of those is, what do we think about a process? So how much facilitation do we need? Because we can go all the way in and have someone come in and facilitate the whole process for us. Because there's a lot of legwork in between meetings and things like that. We can have minimal facilitation and do most of the work ourselves. And the work is going to be gathering community input, gathering input from staff, gathering input from all of our different stakeholders, categorizing it down. There's ways that we can probably do that now with AI if we can put that into the system and have it analyze it. So we might not need a full facilitation route. So I'm looking at different options. I will have those for you, but I would just like you to start thinking about that, what your vision for that process will be and how you would like it to go so we can develop some consensus. I'm actually next week have a webinar through WASA and Dr. Tammy Campbell, who used to be the superintendent for a Federal Way School District, who does some of this work and just sort of getting what their process is. AASA, which is the National Association of Superintendents and District Office people, has some different options as well. ESD 105 can facilitate. So there's just a lot of different ways that we can go about do it. So I would like you to just start thinking about this. And then the other thing we should really think about is how we want to approach the portrait of a graduate. Do we want to do that simultaneously? Do we want to go strategic direction, then right into portrait of a graduate? Do we want to do portrait of a graduate first? We're a little bit behind. AASA I've watched had correspondence with them and met with them. And we're the timing doesn't really work out to do their program strictly because they want you to go to Alexandria, Virginia for 2 days of training, like in 2 weeks, and all that stuff really doesn't work. But we can think about that process later. I actually liked what they did in some of their school districts that have been involved in their process said they felt it was better to do the portrait first and then do the strategic direction after that. Others said they didn't think it mattered. They did the strategic direction first. So those are just some questions for you to ponder and for you to think about. So as we move forward, I'll gather some more data, bring in some ideas, and then, but you've already thought about it a little bit, what you think as a process. So then we can kind of figure out how we want to get going. But the facilitation question is pretty important to think about. And I will, by the next time we get together, I'll have more information gathered. CE does it, so they can take our data and help us with it. There's several different options for it, but it's just kind of figuring out how much we want to do ourselves or how much we want to have someone guide us through that process. Thought Exchange can do it. I would not. Thought Exchange is phenomenal, but it's very, very expensive. So honestly, I would. My personal opinion is we can do something better than that for a cheaper price. But we just want you to think about that. So I put this on there. I'll send this to you, and just so we can start to flesh out, you can let me know the things you want me to start focusing on. And so we will come back to talk about it. We'll be have had a little bit of time to develop some thinking around where you want to go. So any questions on any of those topics? All right. Thank you.
At this time, Troy, thank you. All right, so board, that takes us into business. First up is asset preservation program greenhouse. I take it that's you, Randy.
Yeah, there's no action required on this. This is an annual report that we have to do to OSPI through our ICOS portal. It's just showing that we're maintaining the greenhouse according to the state specs, because it was funded by state money. we have to show that we're taking care of it. So it's just something that I have to put in front of the board and they acknowledge that they've seen it, and then I can put a date stamp on the portal in the ICOs. So right now, that's all we have is the greenhouse. We're going to have several more buildings come up. There's some of the board resolutions that you got tonight. We'll start that clock ticking on those. Any questions?
Board, any questions for Randy? No.
All right.
Thank you. All right.
Yeah,
Right,
so
right.
we have the enrollment report, pretty clean and simple. Last month in January, we talked about we gained 7 students across the district. This month, we gained 7.22 FTE in January. We lost 7.18 FTE in February. And really what that does is put us right on projection for the year. So our budget enrollment currently, or our enrollment for budget purposes right now sits about 0.5 students above our projection. So that's good news. We hope to keep the trend above line, because that will then keep us the last couple of months of the year and make sure that we don't take any type of budget hit off enrollment. So we are right on projection at this point in time.
All right, thank you. Board, any questions? All right. Okay, thank you, Troy. Kim, you ready with the financial report?
Yes.
Thank you.
So tonight I am presenting our financial update for up through January of 2024. And general fund is on target again. They're a little bit below the projected 42% at this time, 38.29% of budgeted revenue and 38.01% of budgeted expenditures. The fund balance has come in at 11%, and there are no discrepancies between Kittitas County treasurers and our trial balance. Capital project fund is showing 20.13% of revenues have been received and 7.19% of expenditures have been reported. The fund balance comes in at 2.21 million. In this fund, we have to remember that most of our revenue that's coming in and expenditures, our revenues actually are our tax levy revenue that is coming in. We don't have bond money coming in or much state funding at this time coming into our capital project funds. There were no discrepancies between Kittitas County treasurers and the trial balance. Debt service fund has received 41.72% of revenue, and 70.35% of expenditures have been reported. The fund balance comes in at 1.39 million. The district paid both a principal and interest payment on December 1st in the amount of 2.7 million in principal and 1.6 million in interest. Our next big payment will be in June of 2024 for our debt service. And there were no discrepancies between Kittitas County treasurers and the trial balance. The ASB fund has received 31.61% of revenue and 17.07% of expenditures have been reported. The fund balance comes in at 523,000. And there were no discrepancies between Kittitas County and district trial balance. And the private purpose trust fund is a fiduciary fund, so there is no budget status report. The fund balance sits at approximately $31,000, and there were no discrepancies between Kittitas County and the trial balance. Our transportation vehicle fund revenue for this fund came in at 3.35%, and our expenditures are at 32.4%. Remember, we get most of our revenue for that fund in August. And the fund balance is at $726,000. We have purchased 2 new buses and looking to purchase probably a 3rd or a 4th this year. Throughout this year. So, and there was no discrepancies between Kittitas County treasurers and the trial balance. I would like to remind everyone that this report is presented with information I have currently and is subject to change as we continue through the year. I would also like to remind everyone that revenue sources are used in their current funds for authorized expenditures and can't usually be transferred to be used in different funds unless authorized within the adopted budget and within the accounting laws. Are there any questions?
Doesn't look like it. Thank you very much, Kim. All right, next item on business is Board Resolution 20-2-24, resolution of final acceptance construction completion of Mount Stewart Elementary.
Where's the celebration? It's complete.
I don't know if any of you have had to deal with any of this before, but this is some of the boxes that we have to check for our D11 to close out our projects that we have still outstanding. One of them is Mount Stewart, one of them is Ida, the school here. We'll have Lincoln coming up here probably not too long. But in part of our D11, what this does is that the board accepts the project as complete, but it does not diminish any of the responsibilities that the contractor still has for warranties and unfinished business. It's just that we're showing on the books that we can close out the project, that we're primarily done with it.
Board, this is an action item, so you have any discussion or? Oh, yeah, sorry.
Randy, is it your advice that we accept the?
Yes.
I move that we accept or pass resolution, what's our number on it, 2224.
I'll second.
Tasha has moved that we accept Board Resolution 20-2-24, and Cindy has seconded. Now's a discussion. Any discussion, board?
I just want to say this has been a huge project and so many people made this possible. It's easy to forget like how much work and how many administration and people and various people have been through here and moved through here to have Mount Stewart be there and as beautiful and as incredible as it is for our community. That was built, during COVID. It came in on budget, came in before the timeline. Incredible amount of work from district staff, local people. It's just amazing and unbelievably thankful to have this on our agenda tonight and to drive past Mount Stewart every time because it's just such an addition to our community and to our present students and our future students.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Tasha. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Board Resolution 20-2-24 has passed. And next up is Board Resolution 21-2-24, resolution of final acceptance construction completion on Ida Nason Aronica.
Same thing. I guess you could say ditto.
Can we say ditto? Point of no? Okay. I move that we accept resolution 21-2-24.
And I second.
Tasha has moved that we adopt or accept Board Resolution 21-2-24, and Madeline has seconded. Any discussion on this one?
Ditto?
Ditto.
No, I should look at Mac and say, can I do that in this? Yeah. No, just huge gratefulness and thankfulness. Like the community supported it. It got built. It's absolutely unbelievable. Such an addition.
And now we're doing archery at demonstration.
Yeah. I mean, it's just so joyous. Like this is one of the great things that the community came together and the public schools here because of the community and everyone doing that. And it's just incredible.
Agreed. All right. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Thank you, Randy. Board Resolution 21-2-24 passes. All right, board. Next up is acceptance of contract for new superintendent, Troy Turno.
I move that we accept the contract for the new superintendent.
I will second.
Tasha has moved that we accept the contract for the new superintendent, and Cindy has seconded. Board, any discussion?
This was one heck of a process. I can only talk on our end, but I'm thankful for the time that you've already spent in the district, like looking forward to the time that you're going to spend in the district. also selfishly grateful to not be here every single night till the lights flicker off. So,
Yes.
but we had lots of community come out and help. And so we read every single note that was left both on paper and digitally. And so that was great that they were able to participate.
All right. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Acceptance of the contract for new superintendent, Troy Turno, is passed. All right, that takes us into policy board. First reading, policy 6222, bid requirements, procedures.
This is a policy that we just wanted to make sure that we were up to date with the language that we need to be in our policy based on WASDA. So we wanted to make sure that we had. So you'll see in there in that policy that the highlighted areas that are highlighted there in yellow by either it was a new title or there was new language. So just those are the changes in the yellow. You also received a procedure document, but the board does not adopt procedures. So you're really just looking at the policy itself. And this is just for first reading.
And this one was one from WASDA.
It is.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So board, this is just our first reading, so we can take a look at it if we have any questions and send them to administration, so. All right. That's it on policy, so that takes us to board reports. Tasha, do you have a legislative report tonight?
I don't. It's like our superintendent said, it's coming to its conclusion. We're not seeing much movement on things. Thankful that people are listening and working towards it, but we didn't see much movement on education related fiscal dollars. So.
And it looks like they close on the 7th. So the 13th we'll have a board meeting. So probably have a report then. I do not have a board chair report tonight. So that will take us into our community input and public comment. So if you give me a second to find. All right, Leslie, if you can get us set up for public comment, please. The board is not obligated to respond to questions or challenges made during the public comment period, and the board's silence will not signal agreement or endorsement of any speaker's remarks. In my capacity as board president, I may terminate an individual's remarks when the allotted time has passed, or if any speaker makes uncivil comments, including obscene comments, comments that are defamatory toward another person, or commentary that is unwarranted invasion of privacy. I'd ask that you respect all staff members' privacy and consider putting any concerns you have in writing if they pertain to an individual or personnel matter. The board can then review and forward those to an appropriate administrator. Individuals in person wishing to be heard by the board need to be signed up to speak, and those on Zoom need to add their names to the document in the Zoom chat box. If you are unable to do this, individuals may also be recognized within the Zoom by using the icon or emoji to show you are raising your hand for public comment. Once the board calls on an individual, they will identify themselves by stating their name and address for the record. Individuals will proceed to make comments within a 3-minute time limit. If an individual wants to request a response from the board, this may be possible by submitting this request in writing or email to board@esd401.org. Leslie, are you ready for public comment?
Yes.
Okay, we will start with any of the people attending in person. And then those on Zoom, if you wish to speak, please let Leslie know in the chat box. Leslie, if you're ready, go ahead and.
Pretty face. I just wait. Oh, I did. Kevin Dwight, 402 South Courts Mountain Drive here in Ellensburg, Washington. I actually am coming to you tonight, not as a former association leader, actually as a community member and as a teacher at Ellensburg High School of the Sciences. A couple things. As my time in leadership ended recently, the board made some changes during my time in leadership to secondary libraries. And the community outcry, the community expression that I heard and the passion that I heard from community members continues to still inspire me. And I still have conversations with folks from around the community. As we get ready to develop the strategic plan for Ellensburg moving forward, I would just ask that the board to think about that outcry that they heard and maybe just include that in your conversations. Is it still something that's open for debate? Is there any chance of revisiting the conversation, including the community that maybe didn't feel heard the first time? In that conversation, I'm just asking for potential grace for the community because I was truly impressed with the folks that came out and spoke and continued to attend and really made their presence known during that time. In addition, I wasn't really planning on saying much else other than the fact that we're currently piloting, I'm wearing the teacher hat at Ellensburg High School now. We're currently piloting the Science Maps program at Ellensburg High School in the 9th grade science program. And then I'm also doing it in a junior senior class that I'm teaching in an elective class as well. So I'm actually still learning. It was exciting to see the board grappling with some of these things. RIT scores, certainly interesting, but I even have a lot to learn. And so it was nice to see. So thank you for grappling with that. It is more complex than even I realized, and I thought I was pretty good with numbers. So lots to learn, but it definitely informs staff to answer a question that was asked earlier. It does definitely inform us as to how we can serve students best and what those individual growth goals could look like, helping students really achieve their best. So that was, thank you for talking about it because it really does mean a lot. It's nice to know that our board is really in tune with what's going on and asking those hard questions. So thank you. Beyond that, more than anything, I know there was a special week to celebrate you as the board, but I don't need a special week. So just thank you for continuing to do a good job and showing up every week and having passion and serving our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.
It's me. Hi, everybody. I moved to Ellensburg in 2009 and my involvement in our school, I babysit my grandbaby so my son Joe Moon could teach math at Morgan. This is the first school board meeting I've been to and it's very interesting and I think you guys are just really smart. My concern and why I'm wanting to speak to the school board tonight and maybe other parents that are here too. I want to talk to you about the bullying at Morgan and at Ellensburg High School, specifically towards our LGBTQIA plus kids. I can't change your hearts. If you think they're bad and what they're doing is wrong, I can't make your hearts love all the children. A higher power has to do that. But I can insist that the teachers, the administrators, the school boards, and the superintendents follow the law of Washington State, which forbids discrimination of anyone based on their gender identity or sexual orientation. Yes, I can ask you to obey the law. I wondered what was going on, so I asked the kids. One junior high non-binary individual told me that when the children are bullied there, they're sent in a room with their bullier to work it out. Can you tell me how I can work it out with you if you hate me for being who I am? How can I make it better? If you don't care about the children that are being bullied, care about the bullies. Do you think they're going to get away with that as adults? They are not. If I come and harass you and I call you names based on your sexual orientation, And you called the police. Do you think they'll put you in a room with me to talk it out? No, they will not. They would not place a victim in a position to be victimized more by their bully. It's got to stop, y'all. Change your hearts. If you can't change your hearts, obey the law. If you can't obey the law, stop teaching in Washington State and go somewhere where they don't give a flying flip and where the laws will protect your bigotry. Washington State is not one of those states. We do not endorse or allow bigotry in our schools. Whenever you blame the victim or don't properly investigate the attacks on the Pride community, you are saying to that Pride child, you are not worth protecting. You better shut up and be still, because if you don't, I'm going to put you in the room with your bully.
I'm sorry, Ally, that is time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ally.
You're welcome.
I give my name and address under duress. I was afraid to come and speak here and use my name and use my real address. My name is Jean Clark. I live at 1408 North Cora. In solidarity with those who are also afraid to speak, afraid of retribution, I will speak. This is a poem about climate change. We live in this school district, in this town, in this valley, where our climate is toxic, where our environment is harming all of us and killing some of us. Martyrs on the path to equity and justice for all. Suicide, death threats, tires slashed, feces smeared, sexual assault, depression, despair, despondency, drugs, death. A young man on crutches walks the hall. Another young man, like him in most ways, kicks out those crutches. He falls, he tries to rise up, beaten down, laughter and jeers of his peers. What will he do with his rage and his humiliation? What would you do? What would I do? What would Jesus do? I spent 6 hours at the Odd Fellows Hall listening to trauma testimony from our students, our staff, and this is why I'm writing and why I'm talking to you. It's not guns that are killing our students. The NRA has it right. It's not guns that kill people. It is people who kill people. Students, teachers, aides, custodians, cowboys, ranchers, cooks, principals, administrators, security officers, secretaries, coaches, parents, school board members. What will we do with our rage, our anger, our humiliation, our sorrow, our despair? What would Jesus do? I cannot leave you like this. I cannot kick out your crutches, but holds you up and allows you to be able to ignore. I cannot kick out your crutches of ignorance or blindness or deafness or apathy and leave you alone. So here is another poem, but it's for another time, for the next school board meeting, because I'm not going to quit. I'm not going to quit till those kids feel safe. I wish you could have heard their stories and then you would know that we can't let it go. I'm going to keep talking till my 3 minutes are up. Hallelujah.
Sorry,
God bless
the
America.
3 minutes is up. So
Say it again.
I'm sorry, the time is up. So thank you, Jean.
You're welcome. Say it again. Jessica?
I'm a lot taller. Okay, Jessica Crane, Field 403, Shell Pit Road, Ellensburg. This may not be the right form to ask, but I was wondering, we had a lot of people that wanted to access Zoom and I couldn't find the link anywhere online, so nor YouTube. So I was wondering for the future so that we're able to attend public forums without having to come here necessarily, if there is a way, if I could find out how to be able to access it so we can let people know. That's all I needed. That's it. Thank you. Can you guys see? Yeah, yeah.
I think Leslie's going to show you. So
They're on there?
thank you, Jessica.
Can see. Thank you for showing.
So here's our website.
Okay.
Yes. That was good.
Yeah, we couldn't find it. Mhm.
So there's our website.
Mhm.
And so no less than 24 hours before the meeting, but usually the Monday before the meeting. It's posted right here on our calendar and also on the front page of the site. If you click in here, here's the Zoom. And it's saying on your calendar is. Last week's meetings, the meetings on 12th and 13th and 14th, those were not recorded because those are job interviews. And we felt that it was, I wouldn't want to have much of it. Very recorded. And but then all of our regular meetings and all of our study sessions or study sessions are not recorded. That's the first meeting of the month. You're welcome to attend, but we just don't record them. And that's when they talk about things like that and have principals come in and give reports and that sort of thing. All of the business is done the second meeting of the month, which is on the fourth Wednesday. And we do record those and they are on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel. With, I don't know if I can find it. If you just type into a YouTube search on search schools.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Leslie, for clarifying that for us. And do you have somebody next? Okay.
And everybody sign up.
Okay. All right, thank you, public. We'll go ahead and close public comment. Thank you for speaking tonight. Board, that takes us into new business. Do we have any new business at this time?
I would like to add some business for the board to consider, following up with what Jen shared in her update of policy 2020 being added and having a discussion about that at a study session. Something that we heard during the superintendent interviews is possibly consider moving this meeting to the high school library. A consideration for that, what would that entail? What are the pros and cons of that? And then something that, then I have two more things. OSPI is currently seeking information from high school students about the high school and beyond plan. There's a platform survey. I don't know if that's gone out to our students, but the legislature last year required by law that all of Washington state high schools use the same platform for the high school and beyond plan. So there's a chance for our students to take a survey and weigh in on that. And then normally I bring this up in June. I'm going to start sooner and keep bringing it up. Can we consider forming a committee or having discussions about our high school graduation requirements versus what the state requires and our current scheduling of 6 periods in a day? And that's all I have for possible new business.
Right. Thank you, Tasha. I think those are all great ideas. So thank you. Board, anything else? All right, that takes us into our meeting closing. Board, we do have an executive session this evening. We will have an executive session to discuss with legal counsel matters relating to enforcement actions or to discuss with legal counsel litigation or potential litigation if public discussion might result in an adverse legal or financial consequence. This session is expected to last about 20 minutes. So for those attending in person and on Zoom, once we return from our executive session, we just have our closing, a couple more steps of closing, and there will be no action taking place after we return from executive session. So Leslie, we'll go into executive session 7:35 and we'll be back roughly 7:55. So thank you.
You come in. Yeah. At least an hour and a half. I couldn't understand Seattle has a world-class center.
Oh. Thank you, Leslie. All right. Board, next item up is board calendar. Do we have anything for board calendar? I think we'll probably do a work session in the spring usually, don't we? So probably want to kind of figure out some dates that'll work for us. Clarification next steps, board. Leslie's got signing of documents all ready for us, so don't forget to sign those. Takes us to adjournment.
I second.
Tasha moves that we adjourn and Madeline seconds. Thank you. We are adjourned.